Good morning, friends, and welcome. Our lodge has a meeting every Sunday at 11 a.m. For the discussion of a topic presented by a student, which is followed by a question and answer session. And on the first and third Sundays of the month, we have a roundtable study class in the key of Theosophy by HPB. The theosophical movement of the 19th century that brought forth new ideas, new to the ideology of the Western world anyway, because these ideas are eternal and they exist from immemorial time, belonging to the truth. The ideal that we should keep forth before us is that of brotherhood, of unity, of oneness. And this was the foremost thought in the mind of those who brought the theosophical movement to life in the 19th century. And if you look at the objects of the theosophical movement, we see that these parallel the three basic ideas of theosophy. So this effort of forming a nucleus of universal brotherhood is still in effect. The idea is that as we, the students of theosophy, gather those of similar minds, whether they be in the theosophical movement or not, to benefit from this work, and the benefit goes to humanity in general. The nucleus or the nuclei spread all over the world gathers a strength, so the dissemination of these ideas and popularization of it becomes easier. And the second object is a study of ancient and modern religions, philosophies, and sciences. This follows from the first fundamental, which is deity, which is unity, which is oneness. And the third object is investigation of the unexplained laws of nature and the psychical powers latent in man. This study, when taken to its culmination, will show the student that the forces of cosmos and the forces that are within himself are correlative. The declaration states that the lodges are independent and their devotion is the cause of theosophy. There is no attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self and a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between the associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, and organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. So then, the true theosophists belong to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following form is signed by the associates of the lodge. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 4, Devotion through Spiritual Knowledge. Krishna. This exhaustless doctrine of yoga I formerly taught unto Vivasvat, the sun. Vivasvat communicated it to Manu, the reigning spirit of the sensuous universe, and Manu made it known unto Ishvaku, the Indian solar dynasty. And being thus transmitted from one unto another, it was studied by the Rajarsis, until at length in the course of time the mighty art was lost, O harasser of thy foes. It is even the same exhaustless, secret, eternal doctrine I have this day communicated unto thee, because thou art my devotee and my friend. Arjuna, seeing that thy birth is posterior to the life of Ishvaku, how am I to understand that thou wert in the beginning the teacher of this doctrine? Krishna, both I and thou have passed through many births, O harasser of thy foes. Mine are known unto me, but thou knowest not of yours. Even though myself unborn, of changeless essence, and the Lord of all existence, yet in presiding over nature, which is mine, I am born but through my own Maya, the mystic power of self-ideation, the eternal thought in the eternal mind. I produce myself among creatures, O son of Bharata, whenever there is a decline of virtue and an insurrection of vice and injustice in the world. And thus I incarnate from age to age for the preservation of the just, the destruction of the wicked, and the establishment of righteousness. Whosoever, O Arjuna, knoweth my divine birth and actions to be even so, doth not upon quitting his mortal frame enter into another, for he entereth into me. Many who are free from craving, fear and anger, filled with my spirit, and who depended upon me, having been purified by the ascetic fire of knowledge, have entered into my being. In whatever way men approach me, in that way do I assist them. But whatever the path taken by mankind, that path is mine, O son of Pritha. And now today's talk, 3 basic ideas of Theosophy.
Thank you. This mighty art, as the Gita puts it, known today as Theosophy, keeps getting lost and reintroduced, but it is always there. In the 1800s, it was once again reintroduced to the world. Robert Browning, Walt Whitman, and Ralph Waldo Emerson produced works known as precursors of HPB, who really brought it out in full as we know it in the Secret Doctrine and the precursor, if you will, to that, the Isis Unveiled. In observing such works, we recognize, as the precursors, we recognize that Theosophy is not a philosophy, but the root source from which all philosophies have sprung. It is not the child of one's brain, or the result of one's speculation, but the synthesis of the knowledge of the ages, which has been accumulated, recorded, and preserved by long lines of adepts, also known as Mahatmas. As for the Mahatmas, Emerson said, "I cannot recite the laws of the intellect without remembering that lofty and sequestered class of men who have been its prophets and oracles, the high priesthood of pure reason, the expounders of the principles of thought from age to age. The truth and grandeur of their thought is proved by its scope and applicability, for it commands the entire schedule and inventory of things for its illustration. In the teachings of these great spiritual lords, as Emerson called them, certain fundamental concepts appear as the central sun around which the entire system of philosophical thought revolves. They become epitomized in the Secret Doctrine in the three fundamental propositions, and these propositions run throughout the entire philosophy as presented in the Secret Doctrine. They were summarized by Emerson in three ways. In his most widely read works, the Oversoul, Compensation, and Self-Reliance. We now have the purity of the Secret Doctrine as our anchor to test against our own intuition and in verifying the path we are on. The first fundamental proposition of the Secret Doctrine addresses unity. We keep forgetting and remembering that concept. This unity lies behind all diversity. That which contains all and pervades all. That from which all proceeds and to which all eventually is absorbed. Emerson realized the philosophical necessity of such a concept. Finding no satisfactory expression of it in the religious teachings of his own day and race, he sought for it within the philosophy of the ancient Aryans, the perfected ones. Emerson's westernized version of the Eastern teachings is found in his essay on Plato, which says, "The mind is urged to ask for one cause of many effects, then for the cause of that, and again the cause, and diving still into the profound, self-assured that it shall arrive at an absolute and sufficient one, a one that shall be all." In that deep force, as the last fact behind which analysis cannot go, all things find their common origin. Being behind the power of analysis beyond the range and reach of thought and speech, Emerson said, "Of that ineffable essence which we call spirit, he that thinks most will say least. When we try to describe it, both language and thought desert us. That essence refuses to be recorded. Language cannot paint it with colors. It is too subtle. It is undefinable, unmeasurable, and we know that it pervades and contains us." Emerson started with basic unity, watched the one become many, and affirmed the necessity of both unity and diversity. Every chemical substance, every plant, every animal in its growth teaches the unity of cause, the variety of appearance. Nature appeared to Emerson as a shadow indicating the presence of the sun behind, suggesting the absolute, yet being wise enough never to define it. The various substances compounding nature's forms are all united. He said, the same, friend and foe, are one stuff. The plowman, the plow, and the furrow are all of one stuff. And the stuff is such and so much that the variations of form are unimportant. We forget that a lot. The act of seeing, the thing seen, the seer and the one spectacle, the subject and the object are all one. Spirit lurks in every form and beckons to spirit in every other form. And that, in which all things are united, is, quote, that unity, that oversoul within which every man's particular nature is contained and made one with all other. That common heart of which all conversation is a worship, to which all right action is submission. So the second fundamental basic idea is found in recognition of the universe as a boundless plain, periodically the playground of numberless universes, and incessantly manifesting and disappearing. In The American Scholar, Emerson said, "There is never a beginning, there is never an end to the inexplicable continuity of this web of God, but always a circular power returning to itself. Therein it resembles man's own spirit, whose beginning, whose ending, he can never find." Good morning. Emerson's recognition of the law of periodicity all this complexity in one word, paved the way for his acceptance of the fact that duality pervades all natural processes. The whole of nature has an inevitable dualism, so that each thing perceived is only a half and depends on another half to make it a whole. Polarity, or action and reaction, we meet in every part of nature, in darkness and light, and heat and cold, in the ebb and flow of waters, in male and female, in the inspiration and expiration of plants and animals, in the systole and diastole of the heart, in the centrifugal and centripetal gravity, in the undulations of fluids and of sound, in electricity, galvanism, and chemical affinity, and it goes on and on. The human mind, with its separate tendency, constantly tries to dissociate the two halves and to consider one without its relation to the other. But nature refuses to be divided like that. Departed water reunites behind a hand. We can no more act without feeling the reaction than we can hope to find an inside without an outside, a top without a bottom. Not even spirit and matter can be thought of as things in themselves, for they are but two aspects of one and the same thing. Once men thought spirit divine and matter diabolical. Now science and philosophy recognize the parallelism, the approximation, the unity of the two. How each reflects the other as face answers to face in a glass, nay, how the laws of both are one. The law of action and reaction, when applied to the moral plane, become a sort of multiplication table, which in turn, as we will, forever it balances itself. Every crime will be punished, every virtue rewarded, every wrong redressed, in silence and in certainty. What we call retribution is the universal necessity by which the whole appears whenever a part appears. The causal retribution is in the thing and is seen by the soul. Cause and effect, means and end, seed and fruit cannot be severed, for the effect already blooms in the cause, the fruit in the seed. The really wise man, Emerson says, will extend this lesson to every department of his life and realize that it is a part of prudence to pay his debts on whatever plane. Persons and events may seem to stand for a time between a man and justice, but this is only a postponement, for sooner or later the man must pay. In his Transcendentalist, Emerson said, "You think me the child of my circumstances. I make my circumstances. Let any thought or motive of mine be different from what they are. The difference will transform my condition. You call it the power of circumstance, but it is the power of me." The third fundamental proposition of the Secret Doctrine presents a picture of the vast sweep of evolution. From the elemental kingdoms up to the holiest archangel, all is life. The idea of dead matter is inconceivable. Every spark that issues from that pure essence, the oversoul, is intelligent. And evolution consists in the unfoldment of that intelligence. In his essay on nature, Emerson presents the same view. There is a latent omniscience, not only in man, but in every particle. There is a force in every creature that impels it to ascend to higher forms of life. Plants are the young of the world, but they grow ever upwards toward consciousness. I'm going to put it down here because I don't have space to write over there. So in a word, those are the three. Emerson's radical views on living matter as opposed to dead matter, the theory of science of his day, were not in the least disturbed by the publication of The Origin of the Species in 1859. He still continued to assert that science, by continuing its speculations to matter and ignoring spirit, could never reach ultimate truth, and the religion, by limiting itself to spirit and ignoring matter, was in the same condition. He saw that something was needed which took both into account and offered a basis of reconciliation, as does Theosophy. The trouble with science, as he points out in The Poet, is that it is purely sensual and therefore superficial. The true scientist must deal with forms according to the life within if he hopes to fathom the secrets of nature. He prophesied that the avatars of Brahma will presently be the textbooks of natural history. Could span hundreds and thousands of years, because when we're talking about this history, time really is not a factor. It is on a continuum. So in his journal of 1866, he gives a dissertation on the Eastern views of science and shows how science can perform its real function only when it learns to separate the real from the unreal and arrives at the contemplation of the one life and the one cause. In recent years, sounds like a long time ago, 100 years ago, but it's not really. In recent years, scientists approached the Dalai Lama in a continuation of struggles that goes on to this day to factor spirituality into mainline scientific thoughts. So both nature and man are rooted in the same identical essence. Both emanated from the same neutral center to re-emerge into it at the end of the cycle. The difference between nature and man is contained in a single word. The kingdoms below man are conscious. Man is self-conscious. The soul of man is that permanent principle in him which changes not, but which is able to perceive the changes going on around him. You have to have something that doesn't change to understand, to see what changes. The soul in man is not an organ, but animates and exercises all organs. It is not a function like the power of memory, of calculation, of comparison, but uses these as hands and feet. It is not a faculty, but a light. It is not the intellect or the will, but the master of the intellect and the will. It is the vast background in which they lie, an immensity that cannot be possessed. Quote from Emerson. Emerson called the soul in man the thinker and the actor, the observer, the perceiver, and revealer of truth. All these ideas are laid out in more detail in these books behind me. He considered it as immutable, superior to its knowledge, the God within. He said, when it breathes through his intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through its will, it is virtue. When it flows through its affection, it is love. And the blindness of the intellect begins when it would be something of itself. It is apparent that Emerson considered the idea of reincarnation. Whoa. It's more widely known today as what that word means, but it's detailed in these books too. It is the only logical one in his statement that the soul, having often been born, having beheld the things that are here, those which are in heaven and those which are beneath, there is nothing of which she has not gained the knowledge. No wonder that she is able to recollect what formerly she knew. And it is said we generally don't recollect what formerly we knew right now, but we do points in our lives, like when we begin entering our body and leaving it. Soul growth means a growth in perception and knowledge, and in the realization of our own inherent perfection. The way this realization lies within ourselves and can be brought about only through our own self-induced and self-devised methods. The tone of self-reliance. Brings through the entire philosophy of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Self-reliance meant to him a reliance upon the God within. He found all the virtues comprehended in the word self-trust, and was convinced that there would come a time in the life of every person when he would have to take himself, for better or for worse, when he would realize that no kernel of nourishing corn can come to him but through his toil bestowed on that plot of ground which is given to him to till. Every heart in the universe, he says, vibrates to the iron string. Trust thyself. Self-reliance is the very sap of the man tree. That sap must be kept flowing constantly, upward and downward, striving ceaselessly toward the higher, conquering daily the lower. Emerson said, "Ah, brother, hold fast to the man and all the beast. Stop the ebb of thy soul, ebbing downward into the forms, into whose habits thou hast now for many years slid." The Theosophy teaches the same thing. We assume the position and pull what's down up. Don't try to go. We go both ways, but that's the way we have to assume. We have to work at that until we become perfect. Ralph Waldo Emerson sounded the battle cry to the warrior soul, the trumpet blast that spurs each person into action. That which energizes the warrior is his own power of self-reliance, his capacity to move from the spiritual center within, his determination to sacrifice. To sacrifice the lower to the higher, not the other way around. The end of the battle will surely come when the soul is raised over passion. It seeth identity and eternal causation. It is perceiving what truth and right are, hence it becomes tranquility. The Secret Doctrine lays out these three basic ideas in its three fundamental propositions. One is omnipresent and eternal and boundless and immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression of similitude. The indefinite and eternal cause is the rootless root of all that was, is, and ever shall be. It is of course devoid of all attributes and is essentially without any relation to manifested finite being or Be-ness. and is beyond all thought and speculation. This Be-ness is symbolized as absolute abstract space and absolute abstract motion. Great breath, it's called. This causeless cause, this eternal and unknowable, may be essentially the same as that is the consciousness which wells up within us. Para-Brahm is a field of absolute consciousness, that is, that essence which is out of all relation to conditioned existence. Within conditioned existence, we find duality, spirit, or consciousness, and we also find matter. Spirit and matter are not independent realities, but are the two facets or aspects of the absolute Para-Brahm, which constitute the basis of all conditioned being. Apart from cosmic substance of matter, cosmic ideation or spirit could not manifest as individual consciousness. Such it is only through a vehicle of matter that consciousness wells up, as I am I, a physical basis being necessary to focus a ray of universal mind at a certain single stage of complexity. And the connection between us is Fohat. I'm about running out of time, so I'm going to quickly summarize things. It is a bridge which ideas exist between divine thought and laws of nature. It's a dynamic. It talks about dynamic energy of cosmic ideation. Fohat's an intelligent medium, guiding power of all manifestation or thought divine, which is manifested through the Dayan Chohans, which are our spiritual progenitors, the architects of the visible world. So from spirit or cosmic ideation comes our consciousness. From cosmic substance, these several vehicles in which that consciousness is individualized and attains to self. Okay? And so the next thing is the eternity of the total universe, as it's summarized, and we've discussed that already. Periodicity is in the second one. Then we talk about in the third one the obligatory pilgrimage of we pilgrims to go through all of these experiences from the material, from soil to vegetable to animal and to human, and to make our way through and learn self-consciousness through our own self, and then after that through our own self-induced and self-devised methods. So the first, running back first, is brotherhood. Okay. The second is perfectibility. We have up there, we actually are perfect internally right now. All of us are. And the third is the third idea includes the example of the masters. Who are totally conscious. They are, as HPB so often said, living man. And she warned that a shadow of woe would come to those who should say they were not living facts, or who should assert that the masters descend not to this plane of ours. They're all around us. We don't even know it. The masses as living facts and high ideals will fill the soul with hope and will themselves help all who wish to raise the human race. As we learn to do that, and we do join the masses, we get recognized, and there's a process for us to become one. Mr. Judge told us not to forget these three great ideas. With that, we'll conclude the talk and open the floor for discussion or questions. I guess we all must get it now. It's something that seems so, from the broadest, like Mr. Judge said, this theory, it's broadest in the ocean of Theosophy. It's broader at the shore, but even a child can understand it. But it gets so deep in the ocean that the greatest minds are work on this theory to try to get it perfected. So that's where we're at. We're somewhere between there, I guess. Comment? Question?
Comment. So then, according to this talk, the whole understanding of the philosophy of the Secret Doctrine, Isis Unveiled, and all the other books written is dependent on these three fundamental ideas?
Absolutely. It's all strung through it. And it's designed, this student understands it, like the Secret Doctrine. It is designed so that you eventually grasp that. You don't necessarily get it at one pass. I've never heard of anyone who gets it at one pass. It might even take lifetimes. But if we are steadfastly focused on these three ideas and study them with the idea that it's not the brain that's going to be working, eventually it's going to be it's going to be the soul, the highest levels possible, then we grasp them. You can read a passage and come back to maybe do it every year and get a different view of it, of the same passage every year. This experience anyway. And I think many of us have the same experience.
So then, to follow up with that, since we are souls and spirit, and since we have been in evolution for millions of years, then the self of all, which is in each one of us as a ray, is the knower. Mm-hmm. So that it knows everything.
It does.
Does this mean then you're just trying to bring it forth because it's recorded in the imperishable center of each human being, says these writings? So that means then you're trying to bring it forth so that the personality becomes aware of it?
Yeah, we are in denial. I mean, in our lower selves, we're conditioned to deny all of what I'm saying. I am I, thou art that. Each one of us is exactly what's got outlined here. But when we're in the body, we have so much going on until it's just challenging to realize that and to live that every second of the day. And in the heat of the moment, if you will, we forget who we are, and we don't act according to the higher self. So it's a learning process. First is we have to understand where we're going, the unity of all. We're not separate. We're not the sinful human beings that is often portrayed, even to this day, in the Western religions. We are that. We have to come to realize it. We have to understand the unity of all and respect everything and everyone around us, that we're all developing through this process to eventually identify and be the one at all times. That's what the masters are. They understand this, they live it. They choose sometimes to appear in the body. They choose sometimes to use us to appear through.
I was looking at conscious and self-consciousness, And I know that as human beings we're self-conscious, and that involves some lighting up. But I was wondering, does contact with matter sort of promote in self-consciousness? Like we see that, we know that the mineral kingdoms and the plant kingdoms tend towards they're not self-conscious. They have limited consciousness. But as we get to the animals, especially the higher animals, you can see that they're almost self-conscious. Is that...
The cats and the dogs are pets. We can see that they are beyond...
Yeah, does
on a cutting edge.
involvement in matter promote, help bring it to
To
that?
a
Or is
degree,
the consciousness
yes.
guiding the matter? Maybe you could just comment on that a little
To a
bit.
degree, it's natural impulse. Okay, up to a certain level, it's natural impulse. Okay, the soil acts as it does. A rock hangs in there together and so forth, and it's said that some people can actually see life in a rock. It is alive. But as we move along, well, we see at the sunflower, right? It's by natural impulse, it points toward the sun. It's a beautiful big flower, and it actually twists around and points toward that light. So it is perfect in its consciousness as a sunflower. It becomes perfect in its consciousness as a whatever. Now we, as where we are now, we have the experience. We were not once a sunflower. This dude once thought that was the situation. But we have the experience of all that as we become humans. And through self-induced and self-devised efforts, as humans, we may have come in this manvantara or whatever. That's a different talk. But we are at a point where we will not progress except through our self-induced and self-devised efforts to make it to perfected human beings. We, like these plants and these animals, within their realm of the world, in the realm of action, they're perfect.
How do you, you said, you talked about the sunflower experience. How can you have that experience without you being that, to raise to the human level? Don't you have to be as a subject to being to experience all these things to raise yourself?
Who are you?
I'm the self.
Are you a body? You are now.
No, right.
But
yes.
you're a personality right now.
Right.
But are you really that?
No.
Okay, you're an individuality, and you're going through all this, right?
Yes, so the individuality goes through all these lower levels of experience, or no?
The life
It's on the
wave
top of your head as a light wave.
The life wave does, not the individuality.
Mm-hmm. But when you become human, that's when you take on that individuality.
You're always a human once you become a human.
Right.
The self-consciousness comes from the lighting of the mind.
Yes.
We have a mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the lower kingdoms have instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Their mind is not lighted up yet.
Right.
So they do everything by instinct, and that's why they do everything perfectly well, because they follow the internal instinct. In man, self-consciousness gives choice. And when we have that choice, it is ours to make, but we don't always choose correctly. By the same token, that's how we learn too.
Mm-hmm. This might muddy things up a little bit, but it's called a group soul, I think, below the human kingdom. We get the individuality in the human kingdom. Am I getting pretty close? And that's when we are also responsible for developing that individuality, which goes from life to life to life. Our personality drops off, but you know, some people say, well, I like my personality, I want it to stay. Well, likes and dislikes are something that we have to work on too. But individuality stays with us from life to life to life. So that's who we are. The Buddhimanas, we throw a triangle usually up on the board and talk about that higher self, which is who we really are from life to life.
So
as long as we work at it.
Individuality taps into the life experience to know all these lower levels of conscious beings. Is that right?
Well, it's the unity of life that we're talking about here. How do we say it? I was not that sunflower, but I now have the experience of that sunflower, although I forgot it. Come on, folks, rescue me. Good question. It's always asked. I've always asked that question too.
The experience is only relational to the sunflower. You would never word the sunflower, but you can appreciate its aesthetic beauty.
Absolutely, and you can appreciate that. So yeah. And certainly animals have feelings. We know that, right? Yeah. And it's said that even that sunflower has feelings, and it must. It must not. It's because it circles around wherever the sun is. So it's a relationship. It's a good analogy. So again, it gets deep. I guess we've kind of absorbed gone through the basics here, and we have talks on aspects of that these basics. Students take a better piece and go into further detail.
But I think once we descend into materiality, it becomes a conflict for human beings to kind of look at it as not being absorbed into it, but as a resource, to look at it as a resource. Because when you look at the animal kingdoms, they only take from nature what they need. Whereas in human kingdom, this greediness comes about, wanting more and more, which is not where we need to be. Mr. Judge says we need to learn to use what we have wisely and beneficently. It is not having more. And one of the master's writings say that all of humanity can benefit from what Earth provides, because it provides for all of its children. But if some children take more than the others, that's when the inequality comes about, inequity. Under strict justice, we are all equal. But on Earth, it looks like that law takes a long time to find its expression in human beings.
No. I don't see any economists in here today, but economists would tell you we have a scarcity, the law of supply and demand and all that. That's man-made. There's a bountiful bounty around us that we don't even recognize. I think that's what we're saying.
Simplicity is required.
What's that?
Simplicity.
Simplicity, absolutely.
Yeah, along the lines of simplicity, just thinking of there are some cultures, probably very few left, that are forager societies that haven't had contact with technology and stuff, and they tend to live in harmony with nature.
Absolutely.
And they work together, and the foraging that they do takes less time than it does for us to, through all our so-called modern methods, to just meet our basic needs of like food and stuff. And they have, I learned this in an anthropology class, they have they have more time together and more time to pursue things that they like because they all work together. And
Sharing.
yeah, they share, but they don't take more than they need from nature. They don't pollute the river. They don't do all these things. And so the question is, do we have to go back to a forager model in order to live in harmony with nature, or is there another possibility?
I think the possibilities are endless, just in a general concept. The possibilities are endless. It depends on our attitude. You know, if we keep digging up the ground and building buildings and so forth, and running the animals back farther into forest, we're going to run into problems like they're running into in California right now. The mountain lion in the city. I don't know whether I'm totally addressing your question, but we have to learn to live in concert with nature. And we can do that in zillions of ways. Our imagination is limitless on that.
Another interesting thing about consciousness, the student heard about this experiment where they were able to determine that people thinking about the result, and it had to do with light, affected the result. If consciousness was applied to it, it would be a waveform, but otherwise it would be like a particle. And there's always this dichotomy in physics: is it, you know, a light, a wave, or a particle?
It's both.
And it's both. It can be either. But I guess this experiment even had people. They were instructed to think about this experiment at certain times, so they can tell somehow with the light if it was when it was wave and when it was particle. And they have discovered that when people focused their attention on it, it took the form of a wave. And it just brings up, you know, we affect every experiment, whether we realize it or not, but specifically applying attention altered, I mean, just focusing on it, not expecting a certain outcome, but just thinking about it did have an effect, and what that could mean for science and its eventual discovery of consciousness and the unseen realms. They're starting to like crack it even a little more.
Oh yeah, they're doing it. They're doing it. They're getting closer to what it says right here. You're talking about light. The student understands that Einstein had that book at his bedside. He was very upset. Well, he was very into light, and he was probably before his times with respect to those experiments you're talking about. So the basics are all here. We got the basics. All of us do. If it's a matter of applying it, like he applied these, got a Nobel Prize for it in theory of relativity. I think that that's what you're talking about. Now they're making that main line. That's become the main line. It took 20 or 30 years for even the best scientists to figure out what he was up to. Now we're beginning to realize that, and can show and can repeat. The idea of science is to try to repeat experiments. When you're dealing with spirituality, it becomes more difficult to do. And the thinking of things, you know, with the brain, it goes higher than the brain. But I think the possibilities are limitless, and science is beginning to realize that, and they're not limiting themselves nearly as much as they used to, although we got a long way to go yet. Yes.
Well, I think unless, as a society, we demand simplicity, we won't get it.
We won't get it unless we say.
Because sophistry and complication is there, and advertisements are actually out there to fool people as far as this student is concerned. We have to use our own internal abilities and demand the best from the providers. Unless we demand it, it will not be provided that way. Simplicity is not a word, it's a lifestyle that we have to exhibit to the world. And we don't have to go to this extreme where people constantly are becoming larger in everything, wanting more and
Bigger and
larger
better.
and bigger. Bigger
Yeah.
is not better.
Well, better needs to be redefined. Yeah,
Yeah.
we want to work toward being better, but better is not necessarily bigger and more powerful.
Yeah.
You
So
know, from a
that
mechanical point of
materialistic
view.
ideologies are still very much part of the society, and as long as we don't remove it, it will remain there. It's
Mm-hmm.
up to each human soul to demand it.
And we have an opportunity in this country starting
Absolutely.
in January, because we know what happened then, and we don't know what the outcome will be. You know, deep in this world of matter, we may, you know, we may realize things and evolve in ways that we don't expect right now.
We have to take
We
care of Earth.
Absolutely.
If we don't take care of Earth, it will not take care of us.
When we forget about the environment, we get in trouble.
Because
But
it can shake us
again,
like flies.
we have private sources now that are coming forth and saying, "Hey, we need to have more focus on renewable energy from unexpected," and this is its understanding anyway, unexpected sources. So you know,
Earth develops from
we need to
inside
work at it
out.
through our own self-induced and self-devised methods, I guess, and try to get them developed. And you had a comment?
Earth also develops from inside out.
Sure.
It is not dead, it is alive. And it can shake humanity off of its surface very quickly, like
Absolutely.
flies.
Absolutely.
And we do need to pay attention to our Earth. Our home is very important.
Yes. And we're representatives. We got to think of ourselves as representatives of that, of the masters and so forth. Do the best we can to work with nature
And support
Continue
those
on.
efforts.
yes. Well, our time is up, so we're going to call it quits for today. We're going to have a reassembly after a few minutes, continuing our work on the key to Theosophy. And next week's talk is on what do we have next week? The 11th.
Hierarchy.
Hierarchies of compassion. Thank you for joining us.